But it's especially nice to see the return of the leader of the Iraq pack, old Deadeyes. Cheney writes, rarely has a U.S. president been so wrong about so much at the expense of so many. Yes, rarely, maybe only one other time. It's easy now to Monday morning not invade Iraq, but Dick Cheney remembers how it felt at the time so right.
You've got to go back and look at the track record. We inherited a situation where there was no doubt in anybody's mind about the extent of Saddam's involvement in weapons of mass destruction.
Yes, there was no doubt about the extent of Saddam's involvement in WMDs, but we did the right thing and invaded anyway. Folks, it takes huevos rancheros to blame the outcome of a war you started on the man who ended it.
How I love the lingo of the neocons, WMD. They love it. Anyway, like a bad rerun, your TVs have been filled lately with the same hucksters, hawks, and neocons that pushed us into war in Iraq in the first place a decade ago. They're at it again, apparently, incapable of shame, certainly unable to appreciate irony. The people who got it so wrong back in 2001, 2002, and 2003 are now pushing to get us involved in a sectarian religious civil war over there in Iraq. On CNA, whatever that is, CNN, yesterday, Weekly Standard editor Bill Kristol, one of the biggest cheerleaders for war in 2003, responded to a suggestion from Senator Harry Reid that he, Bill Kristol, ought to apologize for his past war advocacy. Kristol, of course, refused to apologize. He also had an interesting back and forth with Carl Bernstein over his role hyping the conflict.
I'm not apologizing for something that I think was not wrong. I think going to war to remove Saddam was the right thing to do, a necessary and just thing to do. But look, we can debate 2003. Carl can go on about how terrible it was. I could debate what Harry Reid said before the surge, that it couldn't possibly work in 2007. We could go over 2011, the failure to leave a force there, the failure to get involved in Syria, which I think was the real disaster. But I would like to say, in my defense, and I think others who've tried to write things in the last few days, we've tried to look at the situation on the ground and say, let's not even relitigate the past. What do we do now?
Apologies would be in order at this point from the neoconservatives who banged the war drums so disastrously, Bill.
Hogwash.
Hogwash. I guess Fiddly D wasn't available. Anyway, how convenient his not wanting to, as he put it, relitigate the past since he got us so disastrously wrong in the beginning. Eugene Robinson's Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post and an MSNBC political analyst. Joe Conason joins us also. He's editor of the National Memo. You know, they're all back, and it's so fascinating that they do get space. They sort of own the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal. They seem to have easy entree to your newspaper on a regular basis.
Yeah.
What do these people do besides write these op-eds? They're in organizations like the American Enterprise Institute and the Heritage Foundation. They get paid, what, $250,000 a year to write an op-ed every 3 months?
Well, I don't know what salaries are like at AEI or Heritage.
You know what they're doing.
But, you know,
that's what they do.
What they're doing now pretty much full-time is advocating for a different Iraq-Syria policy, one that involves more use of U.S. military force, which I think is a highly dubious proposition in my view.
But they're talking, like Kristol's now talking about going in on the ground. This week, Bill Kristol and Fred Kagan wrote an opinion piece for the Weekly Standard, that's Bill's magazine, in which they argued for sending American forces back to Iraq. It would mean not merely conducting U.S. airstrikes, but also accompanying those strikes with special operatives and perhaps regular U.S. military units on the ground. So they're going right back into the war. But take a look at that headline. What to do in Iraq. Well, perhaps the editors at the Weekly Standard are playing a joke on us. Not really. But 12 years ago, Bill Kristol and another Kagan, his brother Robert, did a piece called, believe it or not, What to Do About Iraq. In it, they made the case for removing Saddam Hussein. They wrote, quote, although we hear only about the risks of such action, the benefits could be very substantial. A devastating knockout blow against Saddam Hussein, followed by an American-sponsored effort to rebuild Iraq and put it on a path towards democratic governance, would have a seismic impact on the Arab world for the better. Same title, same bad advice. Well, it turns out Kristol was wrong about a lot when it came into us going into Iraq. Listen to his exchange on C-SPAN in March 2003, in which Kristol predicted a very short military engagement in Iraq.
Whatever else you could say about this war, let me just make one point. George Bush is not fighting this like Vietnam. We don't need to refight the whole history of Vietnam.
Maybe. That's the danger of Saddam.
But it's not going to happen.
Let me take
it's
a
not
call
going to happen.
From
This is going to be a 2-month war, not a
Park Hill,
year war.
You know, what do you say about that, Joe Conason? That was, by the way, do you remember it was only a 2-month war in Iraq?
Oh, yeah.
2003
which 2 months are we
to
talking
2014.
Yeah.
I mean, how do these guys, I mean, if they were selling used cars, people would be punching them in the nose.
They'd be arrested.
I don't know what you would do.
No, they'd be arrested, Chris. I mean, they would be arrested.
The idea of buying, and then they come back and say, remember the car I sold you 12 years ago and said it was going to last forever, and it turned out to be a lemon? I'd like to sell you another car now.
See,
the same model, the same deal.
When they go on TV every time, a clip like that should be shown, and there are many of them. I mean, Bill Kristol, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, all the rest of them made lots of predictions that turned out to be false. They predicted, for instance, that there would be no Shia-Sunni civil war. The insurgency would be mopped up in a few months if there was one. I mean, it would cost us nothing. It would pay for itself. It's cost us $3 trillion. I mean, the record here is really outstanding in its complete failure to confront reality of any kind. I mean, these are guys this will remake the Arab world and the Middle East. Well, you know what it did? It turned Iraq over to Iran, essentially. I mean, right now.
Well, this is the interesting thing. And I'm a student of this, Gina, and you and Joe, we're all students of this. We read the papers every day. We try to figure out the points of view. The new point of view is, it's bad enough we have this ISIS group running around trying to create a new country between the Sunni part of Syria and the Sunni part of Iraq. They're very worried about this new friendship, which has been developing for years now between Iran and Iraq. Because now they're all saying we got to be afraid of that. That is the new drumbeat. So we must go in and fight for Maliki so that he won't go to Iran.
So they haven't been paying attention for the last 10 years, right? They haven't been paying attention to the Maliki.
So we get rid of the one buffer to Iraq, to Iran. The one thing that stood in the way of Iran was Iraq.
This is
we get rid of it.
Right. The main effect of this war has been to greatly strengthen the hand and position of Iran, which is our mortal enemy, right? We have actually made things much easier for Iran. We eliminated their #1 competitor, their neighbor.
Hegemonic. Their hegemonic rival.
Exactly. They're the
I don't even understand the politics sometimes, because if you look at the regional threats, the threat from Iraq was never anything like the threat from a real country like Iran. This has got a real economy. It's got really educated people. It's going to really be a threat, particularly to Israel, but it was also the other Sunni countries like Jordan and Egypt. And yet they would spend all this effort going after a fellow Sunni-led country like Iraq, which was not a problem for Jordan. It was not a problem for Egypt. It was not really a problem in any kind of strategic sense for Israel. It just wasn't. Iran's a strategic threat to Israel. Your thoughts, Joe?
The difficult thing to figure out from the beginning of this, Chris, and you and I were on a college campus discussing this with our friend Joe Scarborough and some other people before the war started, is to figure out why they wanted to do this so badly. The argument over the WMDs, I'm sorry to say, Dick Cheney's wrong. Not everybody believed that. I certainly didn't. I don't think you did either. Lots of people said the Colin Powell appearance at the UN, all the rest of it was very, very thin. There was very little evidence that he still had WMDs. And they invaded before the inspections were completed. So they didn't really want to know whether he had WMDs before they started the war. So why did they really want to do it? To this day, it is very hard to figure out, because none of the theories that they had about it made any sense, that this was going to remake a democratic Middle East. No, this was going to empower Iran from the very beginning. If you put the Shia in power in Iraq, they had been living in Iran. Iran had been protecting these guys.
Anyway.
So it made very little sense.
The funny thing is the arguments escaped with the people who made them.
Yes.
Thank you, because we can't remember what they were. George Bush is bad because they tried to kill his father, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Gene Robinson, thank you.
We should always point out, by the way, that Iraq was once our buddy when they were fighting against Iran.
Weren't we arming them?
We paid for that, too.
Thank you. We changed sides, too. Joe Conason, thank you, sir. And thank you, Gina, as always. Have a nice weekend, guys. Coming up, that Republican who changed his name to Cesar Chavez to win Latino votes says he did it because of dog food.